Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is João Barbosa. I'm from Brazil, and I work at VTrust Inspection Service. We are based in Guangzhou, China, and I will be the presenter of today's webinar. Thanks for joining us. Okay, so our webinar's topic today is expanding sourcing destinations. The countries that we're going to cover is China, India, Vietnam, Cambodia, and Bangladesh. What is the reason why we chose this topic? The reason why we chose this topic is because our customers, our current customers, and also the clients that we've been meeting at the fairs. For example, last Canton Fair, we had lots of questions about new sourcing destinations for different reasons. And we decided to do this in order to help you to understand more about these countries, to understand more about the business in these countries. So that is the reason, because our clients asked us, and we are providing not only our clients now, but also everybody that is interested in this, in expanding their sourcing destinations. So we divided this webinar into two parts to not be too long. So each part will take approximately 15 minutes. Part one, which is today's webinar, we will cover pros and cons when sourcing China, India, Vietnam, Cambodia, and Bangladesh. And part two, which will be tomorrow, we will cover trade shows in China, India, Vietnam, Cambodia, Bangladesh, and also industrial clusters in each one of these countries. For example, the northern part of each of one of these countries, what products they manufacture there. South part, so we will show you the maps, the industrial cluster maps in each one of these countries. So let's start part one. We will cover a little bit about this sourcing trend, the factor, one of the main reasons why there is this trend, the industrial expansion here in China, just for us to understand what's going on also in these other countries. We're going to show these destinations, the advantages and disadvantages of the trend, ease of doing business in these countries, and the resources for sourcing. So the sourcing trend, the most recent factor, the most recent reason why there are a lot of buyers trying to find a new destination is the trade war. The trade dispute between China and America. So if there is an American audience, if there are American buyers watching this webinar is perfect for you, especially because of this current situation. And for the other audience, for buyers from different countries, this webinar is also for you, because we always have to have a plan B. Take what is going on with American and China right now, what the American buyers are passing through. So we always have to have a plan B. So if something like that happened to you in the future or the near future, you already know where to go for, what to look for. And we're going to go to our next topic, which is searching for low wage. So one of the reasons why these manufacturers are changing, are going to other countries is because it became expensive for them where they used to have manufacturers. So they go for countries that provide them cheaper labor. And before it used to be Japan, the major manufacturer center, and then South Korea, and then it became China, and from China it started to expand all over Asia. And the reason is definitely one of the biggest reasons is definitely low wage. As you see here in the graph, from 2002 to 2007, China had the lowest wage, and from 2007 India started to show as lower wage compared to China. So many industries, many manufacturers started to also look for the Indian market. So from 2007 to 2010, as you see, India overcame China as the lowest wage compared between these two countries. And also, if you see a comparison of monthly minimum wage in these Asian countries, you can also see that there is opportunity there. For example, China has the highest, and then followed by Thailand, followed by Indonesia, then Vietnam, then Cambodia, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. Of course, these countries they don't provide every type of product. Sometimes they are good at one type of products, but they're not good at others. Compared to China, that you can find pretty much every type of products in China, but these countries with this minimum wage that is very low, sometimes they cannot provide you with the products that you're looking for. So this is what we're going to cover with these webinars. We're going to show what each one of these countries are good at. Let's understand a little bit about the domestic industrial migration. When this industrial expansion start to happen. Back in 2003, when VTrust was established, as you see here on the right side of the map, only the East Coast, only the Chinese East Coast was industrialized. And then, because of regulation, because of government initiatives, the industries start to migrate towards the East, especially the cheap products or not very high-tech type of products. These industries, these manufacturers start to migrate, looking for lower wage, looking for less regulations and government incentives. So in 2015, and you see when this expansion of sourcing destinations also happened here in China, but you see here in VTrust map, things already started to happen in India, started to happen in Southeast Asia, and in inland China. So from the east, start to expand towards the west. In 2025, this is what the government expects, that the West will also be sort of industrialized, and in the east side, the very high-tech industries, the very high-tech manufacturers will stay, and the less sophisticated manufacturers will start to help to develop the West. And also in Southeast Asia, also Western Asia, and so on. So now we're going to cover the advantages of this trend, the advantages of looking for new sourcing destinations. So maybe the most important one that everybody's looking for is low costs, because by the time the wages become high and there are more regulations, the prices of the products increase. So these new countries, these new sourcing destinations have definitely low costs. And this is what buyers are usually looking for. The advantage is there is also less regulation. Where there is less regulations, the factories don't need to spend much money at developing their manufacturers. They don't have to adapt to environmental laws. So they don't need to invest a lot of money, and that makes the price cheaper than in areas that are more developed, that are more regulations. Also, low wages. Low wages also bring low costs, and financial incentives. The government of these countries finance these manufacturers. They provide resources to these manufacturers, so they are able to cover part of the costs in ways of incentives. So it becomes very attractive because of that, because they don't need to invest money from their own pocket. So if the government provides them with this type of financial motivation, they can make the price a little better. So it becomes very attractive. And also these areas are highly populated. So from the manufacturer point of view, it's very attractive, for them to have manufacturers in these countries because there will always be labor. There will always be people to work for them. So that means that they will never run out of labor, which could bring a lot of costs, which could bring a lot of delay. So these areas are attractive also because of that. There will never be a shortage of labor. And also good recruiting capabilities. Because of these areas are being developed, lots of labor are migrating to these areas. They're going back. They're migrating back. They're going back home. They're going to these areas that are being developed now, because many in China, for instance, many of the population from the West migrated to the East when the East was being developed, and with that, the West didn't have good recruiting capabilities. But now, since the West of China is starting to be industrialized, many of this labor are moving back. So it's a very good it's a very good motivation for these manufacturers. The disadvantages of this trend: poor infrastructure. This is one of the biggest disadvantages of this trend, because it's all about the delivery time also. So if there is poor infrastructure, if there is poor roads, port system and transportation system in general, there will be delays, there will be more costs because of this transportation problem. That will bring the price of the final price very high sometimes. For example, in Cambodia or Vietnam, these factories that are inland, they are more like far from the main industrial clusters. They have huge problems to put the goods out to the port, to move the goods to the port. It could take, while in China, it could take maybe 5 days from production, for some products, of course, for production to delivery time, to the port, could take 10 days. In these other countries could take 30, sometimes even more than that. So if you take that into account, it's definitely a big disadvantage. Also, these countries are still developing the legal environment. So if you face some problems with the factory, if you have some disputes with the factories, for example, the factory didn't follow the contract, or they simply disappeared, or they are charging more than they supposed to. Anyways, things that are not in the contract, and you have to sue the factory for that, for those reasons, you will face some difficulties. You won't have things going as smooth as it happens in these developed areas, in these industrial developed countries. Also, disadvantage of the trend is inexperienced workforce. For example, I mentioned as an advantage that lots of skilled labor are moving, but lots of them are staying as well. So sometimes you have lots of workforce, but they are local. Lots of times they are local and they are inexperienced, which means you have maybe poor quality control, or the product quality will be inferior comparing to areas that are more sophisticated, that are more developed when it comes to the industrial sector. And also you will have, as a result of poor infrastructure, high transportation costs, still developing legal environment, an experienced workforce, and poor quality control, you will have more headaches, definitely. This part of our webinar, I will show you from the manufacturer point of view, the ease of doing business by World Bank. So by looking at this graph, you can understand from the manufacturer's perspective how hard or how easy it is to doing business in these countries. If it's hard for them to do business in these countries, because most of the time these manufacturers, for example, Vietnam, Cambodia, Bangladesh, sometimes in India, they are not, I mean, most of them, they are not 100% Vietnamese or for 100% Cambodian, or so, which means they are mostly foreign manufacturers. They are, for example, Cambodia, there's a lot of Chinese, Koreans, and Singaporeans doing business there. In Cambodia, Vietnam is the same thing. So if you see that it's not easy for them to do business, that means that won't be easy for you to doing business with them. For example, if you see here, starting a business, you see in Thailand, it's reasonably easy to start a business there compared to Cambodia, Myanmar, that is not that easy. Dealing with construction permits, getting electricity, registering property, getting credit, protecting minority investors, paying taxes, trading across borders, enforcing contracts, resolving insolvency. So if you analyze this graph and you see that it's very hard for them, so you can guess, you can predict that something could possibly go not as smooth as you thought that would be. Now we're going to cover a little bit about sourcing in these countries. So sourcing in these countries are not very different from sourcing in China, for example, but some parts of the process you have to pay more attention to. For example, first you have an idea, you come up with a product, and then you go online or you go to trade fairs and you look for price. After finding the price that you're looking for, you go to the next step, which is analyzing the delivery time. You see if it's worth it. You already have price, but will the goods arrive by the time you need it? Not only for the first order, but when you start to order more often, so you need a schedule, you need the plan, so you have to put that into account, because this is a very important part of this sourcing process. This is one of the process that I said that you have to pay more attention to, because it could become a regular supplier. So you have to see if they can deliver things on time. You have to ask for reference. Maybe you can contact people that ordered from the supplier or from this region where you want to source, and put that into account. You have to pay attention to risks. So is it really worth it? You have a very cheap price, but the delivery time is not worth it, or the area where you're going to source is not very popular, or you haven't heard people that actually have bought from this area. So you have to stop at this point and analyze all of these criteria: price, delivery time, and decide if you want to move on. Put the risks into account. And then if you decided, you're going to have an agreement with your supplier or your suppliers, and you will start discussion with them when it comes to contracts. So this part that you're going to discuss with them, it's very important, because just as you probably do with your Chinese suppliers, for example, you have to make things very clear in the contract. Not only that, you have to enforce. You have to make sure that you can enforce these points of the contract. And after you make sure that your supplier agrees with that, you guys are going to sign the contract, and from that you will calculate. You will come up if it's worth it or not to move on. Once the goods arrive, if you are obviously, if you agree with that, you order from them, paid, and the goods arrived, you will put everything, if it's worthy or not, and continue ordering from this same supplier. So now we're going to cover the resources. How to source in these countries. You're going to start with your online database. For example, you go to this sourcing platforms such as Alibaba, for example, or Global Source, or Made in China. And this is the most popular one. This is the easiest, maybe the easiest way to find these new suppliers, to find supplies in these countries. After that, a very safe way and a very maybe common way to go find these supplies is by commercial chambers of commerce. You can go to their website and find the list of manufacturers that their members work with. And if they don't have a list, or if they don't have a website, try to call them or try to contact them, and they will give you a list of the suppliers that are trustable, that you can deal with for each type of product. Also, you can try to find associations of plant products. For example, each of these countries has the association of garments, the association of electronics. So you also can visit their website or contact them by email and try to see the list of factories that you can work with. Also, you can find professional source agents. If you go on Google, or if you have a friend that have been sourcing these countries, they might have an agent working there, and they might be able to help you. Or if you go online, you might be able to find these professional sourcing agents. Just make sure they are professional sourcing agents. They are agents. You make sure that they have good reputation, they have good recommendation online. Also, you can find information provided by industrial parks and economical zones. It works pretty much the way the associations work, or maybe commercial chambers of commerce. You can go to the website and they will have a list of manufacturers that you can work with. And also trade fairs. Maybe this is it's seen as difficult to go to a trade fair. You have to travel all the way from your country to this sourcing destinations and visit their trade shows. But it's indeed the most, maybe the safest one, and the most guaranteed, one, because you're going to see the suppliers face to face. You're going to visit the factories after that. So this is indeed the most effective, one. The sourcing platforms for China, Vietnam, India, Cambodia, and Bangladesh. Alibaba.com is for all of these countries, but each one of these countries has their main sourcing platforms. For example, Vietnam B2B Direct, India, TradeIndia.com, Cambodia B2B Cambodia.com, Bangladesh PriceQuota.com. They have other resources as well, and you might be able to find them online, but these are the main ones. And you may screenshot this or just wait for the link that you're going to send, and you can research them later. So we are finishing our webinar. So this is a recall, what you should keep in mind when looking for these sourcing destinations: production and delivery time. You have to definitely take this into account. You have to be able, if the factory if the factory is near a port, or if the factory is not very isolated, if there are factories, if there are other manufacturers surrounding this factory, because if it's a very isolated one, probably they will have more time to deliver this to the port, or they might have some problems once in a while, such as weather, so the roads will be blocked, or some other factors. Another thing that you have to take into account is you must have a regular communication with the supplier. When the factory is very developed, when this industrial area is very developed, so sometimes you just have communication with the supplier at the beginning, and then whenever the goods are ready, they will contact you back. But with these countries, with these other sourcing destinations, you must have regular communications with them to know if the product is the way you'd like to, and also to make sure that part by part of the contract is being followed. And definitely have a very strict contract. Very strict contract. You must have every single detail discussed with the supplier, because sometimes you have that, but you haven't discussed the clauses and each part of this. So make sure you write them down and make sure your supplier understands your points in the contract, and keep a record of everything. So this is the end of our webinar, and we have some previous webinars that happened since the beginning of the month, and these links also be available for you on our social media and also by email. So the topics that we covered before this webinar was finding a supplier versus finding the right supplier by our colleague Matthew. Ensuring security of our imports and payments by your colleague Daria, and ensuring trust and guaranteed at each step of dealing with the supplier by our colleague Tanya. So these links will be available to you, and if you want to receive them earlier, you can send a request to my email, and I will send this to you. Okay? So thank you very much, and I hope we can keep in touch. Thank you. Bye-bye.